In 2007, a 105-year-old widow died in New York City. Her name was Brooke Astor, and for half a century, she had been the closest thing America had to a queen. 2 years later, her own son, 85 years old, stood in a Manhattan courtroom and was convicted of stealing from her. Stealing paintings off her walls, rewriting her will while Alzheimer's took her mind. His own mother. That courtroom was the last act of a name that once meant money itself. For generations, Americans didn't say, "Rich as a king." They said, "Rich as an Astor." This family ran America's first business monopoly. They collected rent from New York City itself. A neighborhood, a hotel, an entire town carry their name to this day. And it ended with an old woman, a looted will, and a son in handcuffs. This is the story of how America's first great fortune faded into nothing. Here's what makes the Astors different from every other fallen fortune. Nobody crashed it. There was no reckless gambler, no single catastrophic bet. The Astor fortune was built on the safest asset on earth, land, and protected by one iron rule: never sell. And it worked. For 100 years, the money survived everything. What killed it was slower and stranger. A family that stopped building and started collecting. A feud so bitter it split the dynasty in two and sent half of it to England to buy castles and titles. And generation after generation raised to spend a fortune that no one alive remembered earning. Jacob Astor arrived in America with almost nothing. He died the richest man in the country, holding a fortune equal to nearly 1% of the entire American economy. Within a century and a half, the last of that money was being fought over in a criminal court. Let's start at the beginning, with an immigrant, a boat, and 7 flutes. Jacob Astor was born in 1763 in the small German village of Walldorf, the son of a butcher. At 20, he sailed for America with a few dollars in his pocket, and the story goes, 7 flutes to sell. His brother made musical instruments in London. He landed in 1784, a nobody who barely spoke English. On the ship over, a fellow passenger told him where the real money was: furs, beaver pelts, bought for pennies from trappers on the frontier, sold for fortunes in London and China. Astor listened. He started with a shop, then a trading post, then ships. He was patient, meticulous, and absolutely ruthless with competitors. By 1808, he had built the American Fur Company, recognized by historians as the first business monopoly in American history. His trading post stretched across the continent. The town of Astoria, Oregon, founded by his fur traders in 1811, still carries his name. When the fur trade wasn't enough, he shipped tea, sandalwood, and, less famously, opium into China. He was not a sentimental man, but the decision that made the dynasty came later. And it's the one every investor still quotes. Astor watched the fur trade peak, and in 1834 he did something almost no rich man ever does. He walked away at the top. He sold out of furs entirely and put the money into one thing: land on the island of Manhattan. His logic was brutally simple. New York was growing. It could only grow in one direction, up the island. So he bought farmland ahead of the city, waited for the city to arrive, and leased the land to the people who built on it. He almost never sold. Let others take the risk of building. The Astors would simply own the ground beneath them. Near the end of his life, he said the words that became legend: "Could I begin life again, knowing what I now know, and had money to invest, I would buy every foot of land on the island of Manhattan." When he died in 1848, Jacob Astor was worth at least $20 million. The richest man in America, holding close to 1% of the nation's entire economy. Measured that way, he remains one of the 5 richest Americans who has ever lived. Out of all of it, he left $400,000 for a public library, and the rest to family. The machine was built. The question was what his heirs would do with it. The answer for exactly one generation was exactly the right thing. His son William Backhouse Astor was a quiet, colorless bookkeeper of a man. And he was brilliant at the one job that mattered: don't touch the rule. Buy land, never sell, collect. Under William, the holdings grew so vast that newspapers gave him a title no American had ever held: the Landlord of New York. By the time he died in 1875, the fortune had more than doubled to roughly $50 million. But here is the dark engine underneath, the part the family portraits never show. A huge share of that rent came from the bottom of the city, from tenements. The Astors didn't build the slums of New York, but they owned the ground under thousands of them, and they collected every month from the poorest families in America. Immigrants crammed 10 to a room in buildings the landlords barely maintained. One family at the very top of the city, fed by rent from the very bottom. And notice what this fortune no longer required: work. A railroad has to be run. A factory has to be managed. But rent collects itself. The Astor machine was so perfect that the family's only remaining job was to exist. That sounds like a dream. It was actually the trap, because a family with nothing to build will find something else to do with its energy. What they built instead was a throne. In the 1870s, the wife of William's younger son, Caroline Schermerhorn Astor, appointed herself the gatekeeper of American high society. Not informally, literally. Her ally Ward McAllister declared that New York society consisted of exactly 400 people. Legend says the number was the capacity of Mrs. Astor's ballroom on Fifth Avenue. If you were inside the 400, you existed. If you weren't, you didn't, no matter how rich you were. Caroline made the Vanderbilts themselves, yes, the family from our last story, wait years before she would set foot in their house. She demanded to be addressed not as Mrs. William Astor, but as the Mrs. Astor, one woman ruling an aristocracy in a country founded to have none. That was now the family business, not furs, not land deals, invitations. And invitations started a war. Her nephew, William Waldorf-Astor, believed his wife deserved the title of the Mrs. Astor, and Caroline refused to yield it. And this, a fight over an honorific, broke America's first dynasty in half. William Walldorf's revenge was magnificent and insane. In 1890, he tore down his own mansion, directly next door to Aunt Caroline's, and announced a 13-story luxury hotel in its place, deliberately built to tower over her house and bury it in shadow and crowds. The Walldorf Hotel opened in 1893. Caroline's side answered in kind. Her son John Jacob Astor IV built a taller hotel, the Astoria, right beside it in 1897. Eventually, the two buildings joined into one name the whole world knows, the Waldorf-Astoria. The most famous hotel in America exists because two Astors hated each other. But William Walldorf wasn't finished. In 1891, he moved to England for good, reportedly declaring that America is not a fit place for a gentleman to live. He took his share of the fortune, a full half of the Astor money, out of the country with him. He bought Cliveden, one of the great English estates. He bought Hever Castle, the childhood home of Anne Boleyn. He gave millions to English causes, and in 1917 he got what he was really buying, a title. The butcher's grandson from Walldorf became Viscount Astor, an English nobleman. Think about what the fortune was doing now. The first generation bought land that made money. This generation bought ballrooms, hotels built out of spite, and seats in the House of Lords, things that cost money. The machine still ran, but nobody was feeding it anymore. And two halves of the family were now feeding off it separately, an ocean apart. Now let me be fair to the Astors, because the real lesson is sharper than rich people are foolish. The Astor fortune didn't fail for one reason, it failed for four. First, rent preserves wealth, but it doesn't multiply it, and it trains no one. 4 generations in, not a single Astor had built a business, because none of them had ever needed to. Second, the family split. The feud cut the fortune in two and cut off the compounding that made it great. Third, half the money physically left America into castles, titles, and English country life, assets that consumed cash and produced prestige. And fourth, the world changed. The federal income tax arrived in 1913, the estate tax in 1916. A dynasty built on quietly collecting rent, generation after generation, suddenly faced a government that taxed exactly that: inheritance and passive income. The iron rule, never sell, had no answer for a world that taxed you for simply holding on. No villain, no crash. Just a fortune that stopped being a machine and became a museum. And museums charge admission. They don't pay dividends. Then came the night the fade turned into legend. In April 1912, John Jacob Astor IV, the richest man in America, worth some $87 million, boarded the Titanic with his new wife, Madeleine. He was 47, she was 18, younger than his own son, and pregnant, the scandal of the age. When the ship struck the iceberg, Astor put his wife into lifeboat number 4, asked if he might join her, was refused, and stepped back. His body was recovered days later with a gold pocket watch. In 2024, that watch sold at auction for nearly $1.5 million, more money than most Astors alive today will ever see. His son Vincent inherited at 20 and did something no Astor had ever done. He looked at where the rent came from and sold. The slum properties sold off. The money pushed into charity, into science, into the city itself. Vincent burned the old machine down on purpose because he was ashamed of it. When he died in 1959, he left no children, just a foundation, and a widow, Brooke. For 50 years, Brooke Astor gave the fortune away, nearly $200 million to the libraries, museums, and streets of New York, the city, she said, where the money had been made. She was the last person alive to whom the name Astor still meant grace instead of rent. And you already know how it ends. Alzheimer's. A son who saw the last of the money leaving and started taking it. On October 8, 2009, Anthony Marshall was convicted of grand larceny against his own mother. He was sentenced to prison at 85. He served 8 weeks. The first Astor arrived with 7 flutes. The last chapter of the fortune was written in a criminal court. Walk through New York today, and the Astors are everywhere. Astor Place, the neighborhood of Astoria, home to hundreds of thousands of people. The Waldorf-Astoria, sold and resold, owned today by foreign investors. The name outlived the money so completely that most people no longer know it was ever a family at all. There's a modern lesson hiding in this, and it's not buy land, although the land was never the problem. It's this: wealth that requires nothing of you will eventually make you nothing. Studies of family money today show around 70% of it gone by the second generation, 90% by the third. The Astors beat those odds for longer than almost anyone. The iron rule held for a century, but no rule survives a family that has forgotten why the rule exists. The English Astors still hold their titles. The American fortune is a foundation, a subway stop, and a hotel bearing a hyphen born of hatred. Rich as an Astor, people used to say it from Manhattan to San Francisco. Say it today, and someone will ask you what an Astor is. Every fortune ends the same way. The only question is how long it takes. Subscribe. The next story is already turning to dust.